Hello, everybody. We're glad you're joining us today for the Food Growing Forum. I'm Pat Hitchcock. I'm one of the team that organizes the Food Growing Forum every month. And since it's 3 o'clock, we're going to get started. We're going to be discussing bare root fruit trees mostly during this hour. So because we're meeting virtually, we ask you to keep your computer audio muted. We'll be answering questions via the chat function of your Zoom. So you can put any questions in there you want, not just about fruit trees, any topic that seems appropriate for the Food Growing Forum. You might wish to set your Zoom view to speaker view so you have a bigger view of the slides. And just reminding you that we do record this program, so it will be posted later this week to our website. We also have a reference page for you, and that page will be posted also to the website. So you don't have to take mad, frantic notes unless you just want to. All of this will be posted to our website. Next slide. That would be you, Heather.
Yeah, I'm trying.
All right.
Okay.
And
oh, we got a direction.
I'm not sure I understand.
you all know that our mission is to extend research-based information to the gardening public. That's what we do, and we just like to remind you of our mission. And then the last thing I want to remind you about is that we do send all of your emails to our statewide conference for a follow-up survey. If you wish to opt out of that survey, just put your name, full name, into the chat, and we will not send you off to the statewide. Otherwise, you can expect an email in 6 to 8 weeks, and they'll be asking you things like, did you learn anything from listening to this program? And with that, I'm going to return the microphone to Heather, who's going to talk about the bare root fruit trees.
Welcome. So today we're talking about bare root fruit trees. Some of the topics we're going to be covering is what are some of the advantages of a bare root fruit tree. We'll talk about our climate in general, and then what some of the considerations are on your specific site. We'll talk about how to select different trees, different varieties of bare root fruit trees, chill hours, which is very important, pollination. We all want to get some fruit off of those fruit trees. And we'll talk about soil preparation and planting, and then also some post-planting care after you plant your fruit tree. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Okay. So first, some terminology. Stone fruit, hold on a second. Okay, terminology. Sometimes you'll see fruit trees referred to as stone fruit. Stone fruit has a pit. Some common stone fruits are peach, nectarine, plum, cherry, apricot. You may also hear the term pome fruit. Some common pome fruits are apples, pears, pomegranates, and quince. Pome fruit has a core of several small seeds. And these are pretty much all, both stone fruit and pome fruit are pretty much what you are planting as a bare root fruit tree. Some of the advantages of bare root fruit tree is you get a much wider selection of varieties. Often you can get them via mail order. They're usually $35 or $40 via mail order. It's more economical than buying a planted, potted up fruit tree. The bare roots are dug and stored without soil. It's lighter for transport. They typically have a larger root mass, and they're less subject to transplant shock. They come in a bag with, wood shavings typically. But you do have a more narrow window to plant them. So, and you have to have the soil conditions right at the planting time. Okay, I'm getting my hang of two different mouses. Okay, our climate here in Napa Valley, you need to understand your climate zones. What's important is our USDA zone. We're in 9A and 9B, and what that indicates is the average annual extreme minimum temperature. So how cold does it get? It can get as cold as 20 to 25 degrees if you're in the 9A zone, or 9B is 25 to 30 degrees. So we will have frost here, and most deciduous fruit trees do well here, which is good. There's also a sunset zone, 14, 15, and 17, and or 7, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is the USDA zone. Again, this is plant hardiness, or your average annual extreme minimum temperature in Napa Valley. And as I say, what's important is that how cold it gets in the winter, and our deciduous fruit trees do well here. And then we also have the sunset zones. And if you can see, the valley floor of Napa is pretty much zone 14. That's what's called our coastal warm area. The coastal influences keep it from getting as hot as the Central Valley. It's protected by some of the summer fog. It's a little further away from the ocean. So the valley floor is zone 14. Zone 15 are the hillsides, and that's kind of nicknamed the coastal cool zone. And then you have the hotter areas up at Lake Berryessa, zone 7. And that's really where summers are hotter and drier, and winters are a little colder. It's a good area if you have a late blooming fruit tree, or a fruit tree that requires a longer growing period to produce fruit. So understanding what our different climates are from a general standpoint in Napa, but then it's also important to understand what are your specific requirements on your own site. So on your own site, what's the soil quality like? Does it drain? Do you have any wind impacts? Do you have a cool sink area? If you have a warm south-facing wall, that would be warmer for certain fruit trees. Think about how much space do you have available? Are you creating a mini orchard? Is this fruit tree going to be part of an edible landscape? Is there a source of water nearby? Fruit trees need regular irrigation during the summer to produce fruit. Chilling requirements, we'll talk about that more. And chilling is a total number of hours below 45 degrees. What temperature extremes do we have? Spring rains, how soon does it rain? Certain fruit trees, for example, like an apricot, they bloom early, kind of February through early March. And apricot, typically in Napa, our climate, we could often have rain in that time period. So if you're having rain when your apricot is blooming, you're unlikely to get a consistent crop. But then with climate change, who knows? I have a Blenheim apricot tree that I've planted. It's young, it's only 2 or 3 years old. I've gotten maybe 2 fruit off of it so far, but I'm gonna try. So something to think about. The other thing on bare root fruit trees, you've got to decide what varieties you want and how to select your trees. Trees grow on different rootstocks. Decide what is the height of the tree you want. There's everything from a standard fruit tree grows 18 to 20 feet tall. You can have a semi-dwarf, whether that's 9 to 10 feet or 12 to 13 feet, or you can, which is still pretty tall, or you can have a dwarf fruit tree in the 3 to 6 foot range. And also how you prune it in the summer can also help dictate the height of the tree. But look at your own space available. Are you going to have a regular tree? If you don't have the space for a 6 or 8 foot or 10 foot tree, maybe you can espalier is some space saving ideas. A fruit tree hedge where you do multiple trees in one hole is another thought. So relative size of the fruit trees on the left there, you'll see is a semi-dwarf or a dwarf. So the dwarf is the smallest, and you can have like a dwarf peach tree at between 3 to 6 feet tall. Or if you go all the way over to the right is a standard size on a standard root tree, which is 18 to 20 feet tall. Keep going backwards. Here is a genetic dwarf peach. So that is probably kept to, I would say, 4 to 5 feet. And again, what is determining the ultimate size of the fruit tree is what rootstock it's on. Now the rootstock is the tree below the graft union. The scion is the tree above the graft union. So that's the variety you have. And then where they're mated is a graft union. And then you have the trunk above the ground. But that rootstock really ultimately determines the mature size of the tree. Some trees requiring good drainage. Cherry, specifically, you want to be concerned more that they get good drainage. Cherry, peach, nectarine, almond, walnut. Some other trees tolerating kind of a clay soil in a wet spring would be a pear, apple, plum, pluots, pomegranate, quince, persimmon, fig. I would actually put pomegranate into the category of trees that are drought tolerant. You know, fig, persimmon, apple, an ungrafted apple on its own rootstock. Some very easy trees, figs. Figs are true to their rootstock, and a fig tree is grown on its own branch. So if you have a friend who has a fig tree that you like, you literally can just cut a branch of that fig and stick it in some potting soil in a pot and it'll graft. So a fig will come true to whatever is above the graft union. There is not a unique rootstock for a fig. Persimmons are another tree that has very few pests, very easy to grow, pretty drought tolerant. Again, it needs water to produce fruit, but that's, if you want the easiest ones to start, I would say fig and then persimmon. If you have limited space, we talked about espaliering a tree. You can espalier it. You've got to know how to do your pruning. And if it's a bare root, it takes time. You can buy an espaliered tree already potted up from the nursery. Another idea is this multiple trees in one hole. Similar to, you can buy in nurseries a tree that has multiple varieties grafted onto one rootstock. My experience has been when you have multiple varieties grafted on, over time, one of those varieties is going to become more dominant than the others. But if you're looking for if your site considerations don't allow a mature fruit tree, or you don't have a lot of room in your yard, these are some ideas from a limited space, what you can do. Chill hours. Chill hours are how many hours below 45 degrees, and they don't have to be continuous, that we have. And here is an example, and there's a website, and it'll be part of the resources at the end, but you can go to this website and look at stations. This is station 77, which is in Oakville, how many cumulative chill hours we get at your particular, wherever you happen to live. And pretty much here in Oakville Station, the last 5 years, the data has been between 900 to 1,000 cumulative chill hours. And you're going to need to know that when you buy a fruit tree. And I was surprised actually to see how many chill hours there is. It was more than I thought with global warming and all. 900 to 1,000 is pretty good. Most of your fruit trees that you buy are going to be less than that. Looking at different locations around the valley, Napa, 700 to 1,000, St. Helena, Calistoga, Lake Berryessa, hotter summers, colder winters. So their chill hours there are greater than on the valley floor, Napa, lower valley. So chill hours are important. And when you buy a bare root fruit tree, it'll tell you how many chill hours it needs. So minimum chill hours. So we're pretty good here in Napa in terms of how many we how many chill hours we have. The other thing that you're going to need besides chill hours is pollination. And pollination is the transfer of pollen from the male part, the stamens, to the female part. It could be on the same or it could be a different flower. Some fruit trees are self-pollinating, and when we say this, you don't need another tree, another variety of the same fruit tree to pollinize that tree. So your peaches, your apricots, persimmons, quince, fig, pomegranates, all of these are self-pollinating. So you don't need another fruit tree of the same variety. Most of it, I already skipped over the, hold on one second. I'm getting, and most fruit trees are pollinated by bees. Now there are also fruit trees that you're going to require, I'm going the wrong way, hold on, there we go, that are self-sterile, meaning you need another tree of a different cultivar of the same variety to pollinize your tree or to cross-pollinate that tree. Typically it's your apples, your pears, and your plums. There's lots of exceptions. The bloom times need to overlap, so you have to do your research when you're looking at particular bare root fruit trees. Let's talk about apple and some examples here in the valley. So here's an example of a Fuji, Gala, and Golden Delicious. You'll note it doesn't require another apple tree to pollinate it. And then you can see the different number of chilling hours. And then there's different root stocks. And then what also is interesting is the different harvest times. So there's a lot to think about with bare root fruit trees. If you want to stagger when you have fruit available in your garden, there are trees that you harvest earlier. Some are, early, mid-season, or late. There are trees that'll need a pollinator. Fuji, Golden Delicious, again, don't. And then the different root stocks. And the root stocks, we'll talk about that in a second. Typically, it's for certain fungal diseases. So M111, that rootstock that was listed on the prior, it tolerates wet soil, standard size. Now that other rootstock M7 resists fire blight and mildew. So that might be a consideration you'd want to look at. If we look at that apple, the Gravenstein, you're going to need another apple tree, and they're recommending either a Fuji or a Gala to a pollinizer tree to bear fruit so that you'll get fruit off of that Gravenstein. So you do need to do research in terms of when you're buying a bare root fruit tree, what rootstock is it on, and then also how many chill hours it needs. Here's an example on plums. Now the elephant heart plum, they're suggesting a pollinizer tree be the Santa Rosa. And look how few chill hours, 500 chill hours. But if you only have one fruit, you only have room for one fruit tree, a Santa Rosa would be something you can plant, and you don't need another plum tree to pollinize that Santa Rosa. Very few chill hours. Harvest time in July. Now, a lot of people love the Santa Rosa plum. My experience with the Santa Rosa has been that all the fruit comes in a literally 5 to 7 day window. So that's great if you're going to eat a lot of Santa Rosa plums in that time frame, or you make jam out of them or something. It's an excellent fresh tasting plum. My experience, the harvest period was so short that they're all on the ground or giving them away to neighbors. I have the elephant heart plum, which I love. It's a deep, dark, excellent fresh eating. And that harvest period is over a longer period of time. There's also pluots, which is a combination of plum and apricot. There's a huge, huge variety of fruit trees out there, especially if you're buying them bare root. So what are you to do? Read the tags. So if we look at the tag on this one, so the top tag tells you it's a peach. Yellow, it's a freestone peach. Early bloom at 650 hours. So that's how many chill hours it needs. Self-fruitful. So that means you don't need another peach tree to get fruit off of it. It tells you the rootstock. It looks pretty tall. Dwarf peach nectarines, plums to 12, 18, tolerant of wet soil, not drought tolerant, very winter hardy, resist root knot nematodes, heavy bearing at a young age. Your fruit trees in general, peaches and nectarines will bear heavy young. And I found that with experience in my own orchard. I have 2. And on year 2, I was harvesting, 40 or 50 pounds. So key is, read the tag of what's on your fruit tree when you buy it, whether you buy a mail order or at the local nursery here. So now you've bought your bare root fruit tree. What do you do now? So if you're going to plant it right away, you want to soak those roots in a bucket of water. If you're not going to plant it right away, you want to do what they call healing it in, which is really just putting it on its side, loosely covering the roots with soil. And you're trying to not let it freeze or dry out. A lot of times a bag comes with wood shavings in it, cover it over, don't have it in direct sun. You're just kind of holding it, the week, 10 days until you're able to put it in the ground. And then once you do plant, okay, so what's most important about planting when you dig your hole for your bare root tree is wider is more important than deep. And when you plant it on a little volcano or a little mound and drape those roots over the mound. If there's any roots that are, have snapped, are dead, you can trim them off, but you're not cutting your root mass. You're leaving all those bare roots and just trying to point them out. And that's why I say have a wider hole than deeper. You don't need to add any fertilizer or amendments to the planting hole in our area. It's pretty much not needed. Position the graft union, and if you see on that picture, you can see where the graft is and make sure that's above, and plant high and fill the soil back in that you took out of it. You can see that little graft union. Ideally, you want that on the north side so that the sun doesn't damage that area. So fill the hole back in and then tap it down to remove any air pockets you might have. And then you water it in. This picture shows a mature fruit tree, not a bare root fruit tree. But you want to add mulch around the base of the fruit tree, and you want to have a basin to water it in. And have a plan for your irrigation going forward. Fruit trees need a lot of water in the summer. A thick layer of mulch to help conserve the moisture in the ground, but pull the mulch away from the trunk of the tree. You want to minimize any type of rot right around that trunk. And then the hardest thing after you've planted your fruit tree and you spent that money, cut it off. Okay, so what that's called is heading the tree. You cut that tree anywhere from knee height to 36 inches. And yes, it's going to look like a stick. What that does is force the tree to develop branches lower down. So think about where you want that lowest branch to come out of the fruit tree, and it'll come out at these buds. And you cut off all the other limbs, and you have a stick. And you want to paint that stick with a 50-50 mix of white latex paint. And what you're trying to do is prevent the sunburn. So what we've talked about for bare root fruit trees is you want to select your variety, and think about when you're trying to pick a variety of fruit tree, what do you enjoy eating? Are you going to eat it fresh? Are you going to preserve it? When is the ripening time? Does it all ripen the week that you go on vacation somewhere? Understand if you need another tree, another pollinizer tree. And then really think about the location. Plan for success from the beginning. I have seen so many times, and I'm guilty, we go to the nursery, oh, I never thought about a peach tree. Oh, I'll have a peach tree. And I plant it. Well, it was against the fence and it didn't get enough sun, and oh, I'll get around to irrigation later. Or you really plan for success from the beginning. The other thing, plant high. What I mean by that is you're better off to have your fruit tree higher up. It'll settle down a little bit. And then as you're adding mulch over the years, I thought I was planting high on one or two of mine, and I ended up having to dig them up and replant them because mulch was getting around that crown. And you don't want to have that. It was kind of sunk in a basin. So one of the best resources, and Pat has a resource page that we'll leave you with, is the Home Orchard publication. It's a book that's available through UCANR. And as always, we have our UC IPM websites and a lot more information available on the website. We haven't gone into pruning. In fact, I was just out today spraying. I pruned in December, but spraying all my fruit trees. That's enough for another whole talk. Once you plant your bare root fruit trees, then you do have to be doing pruning, ideally summer pruning for size and winter pruning to clean them up. And typically you will have to be doing some kind of spraying. But I hope this has given you a little bit of idea about bare root fruit trees. They're easy, a lot of bang for the buck. Just think what varieties you want and think about your location. Okay, any questions out there?
Question, which nobody put in the chat, but when you mention you can start your own fig tree from a cutting of a fig tree, is there a time that it's best to do that?
Whenever you have a fig cutting. Literally, figs are so, my family had a property and there were some nice white figs there, and it burnt in the glass fire. Well, we were able to salvage, that was what, September, a year and a half ago. We just cut up that fig tree and stuck them in a pot, and they take. Figs are easy.
And I see someone else asked that question too. So it was on our minds, Heather. Thank you. And the other question is, can you start it in a pot regarding chill hours? I'm not sure what that means, what that question is. Megan,
so yeah, chill hours is it has to go through a dormancy. The number of chill hours is what wakes the fruit tree up in the springtime so that it then starts to flower. So the fruit tree doesn't care if it's in a pot or a bare root. It's that chill hours is what breaks your dormancy.
and I looked up there's a weather station that the UC runs down in Carneros, and so far this year nearly 500 chill hours. So even though we think of Carneros and American Canyon as being a lot cooler than other parts of Napa County, they still get a significant amount of chill hours.
Yeah, we really are fortunate where we live here that, you know, deciduous trees and grapes, I mean, they do well in our area.
So I think the question about the fig in a pot was, do they still need the chill hours? And yeah, they would still need the chill hours.
Yeah, the chill hours has nothing to do with whether it's bare root or potted. And figs typically produce twice a year. You'll have a first blush in the June timeframe and a second crop in September timeframe.
So Heather, Pamela asks, what type of amendments should be added to the soil? That's question one. And do you suggest staking or supporting the tree, which is a different question. I'll let you run with those.
Yeah, so really pretty much our soil here, if you have bare soil and you're going to be planting for orchard down the road, the best thing you can do is just throw mulch on it or compost, and then next year dig a hole and plant in it. But we don't need amendments in our soil here for fruit trees. You can do a soil test, but you don't need it. And you can check to see how well draining the soil is. That's a good, you dig a hole, I might not have this correct, but you dig a hole, you put water in it, and you see how quickly the water drains out of the hole. And if it drains fast, you have well draining soil. So that's a simple test you can do from a drainage standpoint, which is probably more important in turn than amendments to the soil.
I want to interject here that if you create a really beautiful hole for a tree, any kind of tree, a fruit tree, a bush, or whatever, and it's really well amended and really rich soil, and you plant and you have this hole in our typically clay soil, what you might end up doing is creating the equivalent of a pot in the ground. And one reason we don't amend the soil when we're planting a tree is to encourage the tree roots to move out into the native soil. And if you make the soil too different, then the tree roots aren't going to thrive.
And that's actually an advantage of a bare root fruit tree. You're not bringing in a different type of soil. So those roots are going into 100% your native soil. There isn't, like Pat says, you're not creating a pot in the ground. There's not a layer between amended soil and native clay.
And then do you want to talk about staking the tree?
Oh, I'll give my 2 cents on staking it. You shouldn't need to. I've never staked my trees. I mean, I kind of look at a tree, if you're staking it, you're not letting it get healthier to bend and flex and get stronger. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
I think if you properly prune your bare root tree when you plant it, there's no need to stake it. It's not very tall. It's just basically a whip. And by the time it starts to have branches, it will have developed a good root structure and be pretty good.
Yeah, it really does look like a stick. I mean, you've done all this work and you're like, I have a stick in the ground, but they grow fast. It's amazing how quickly you will have a full-size fruit tree.
Katrina asks, if I planted the tree, do I need to water the soil immediately if it's already wet? It recently rained and all the soil is still quite moist.
So if you just planted, for a couple reasons, air pockets around the soil, that interface between the roots and the soil, right after you plant a tree, whether it's bare root or other things, you should water it in.
And also, can you elaborate a little bit more on the 50-50 latex paint?
Oh, so you're just trying to prevent sunburn. So the first year, what I did in my garden is I just took some latex paint I had and mixed water and paint 50-50. So half water, half paint. So it was a thin paint. And I painted that on the trunk of the tree to prevent sunburn. Since then, actually what I've done instead is I have, what do you call it? Like a bamboo, really thin bamboo you might make a screen out of, or it might be covering an arbor. And I had some of that and I just cut it into 2-foot lengths and I wrapped it around the tree. So your goal is to prevent sunburn on the bark of the tree. How you do that, you could do it with burlap, you could do it with painting the trunk, but you're trying to prevent sunburn on this new tree.
Yeah. And Sophia says asks, when you cut the bare root down to 36 inches after planting, what do you do with any branches below the 36-inch mark?
Oh, you should cut them off. Yeah. So what you're trying to do is establish the trunk of the tree. Typically, there's not going to be a branch below where you cut it, but you want to trim that off. Well, first you want to ask yourself, where do you want your first lateral branches coming out, the scaffolding of the tree? And where you cut, it will force below that cutting point, it'll force any buds to form those lateral branches. So if there's already one lower than that, you could leave it. I've never seen trees come that way, but you could leave it because that's starting to develop the structure of the fruit tree. But typically when they come bare root, the branches are above where you would be cutting them between knee height and 36 inches. But yeah, there's no harm in leaving that branch there. So you have to decide ultimately what's the height, where do you want the branches starting to come from? And most home gardeners are looking at managing a fruit tree so that it is maybe 8 feet tall max. So you want to have the structure coming at maybe 2 feet, the branches starting off lower. I mean, not so low that you can't get under the tree, but it just creates the tree lower and you don't have. Now, if you wanted it for shade, I mean, you would let it go for 5 feet and then you'd have the whole structure above that. But to harvest fruit and at a manageable, typically for the home gardener, you want to try and keep them short.
And one last question, because we're going to get ready to hear Linda's presentation on what to do this month. How do you know if a tree is getting sunburned?
Oh, that's interesting. Well,
It cracks.
Yeah, you'll see it start to wear and tear is the wrong word. You'll see it. Yeah, I guess Pat, you're saying that you'll see a crack, huh?
On
Yes.
apples, this is Yvonne. On apples, you actually can see it'll look sunburned. It'll be darkened, or it'll look dead. So it'll look like a kind of a sunken brown area, and it will crack as it heats up.
It just will look injured. And by that time, of course, it's a little late to paint the latex wash on it.
And that's another reason why we try to, if you think about it, when you plant your bare root, move that graft union facing north so it's not exposed to the sun.
Okay, let's stop this part of the presentation and go to Linda.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, and we see you
Okay.
very well.
All right, well then I will go ahead and start. I am Linda McClymans and I'm a master gardener from the class of 2020, and I'll be talking about what to do in your garden in January. So, time to plan. This is the time to review seed catalogs and develop garden plans for the coming year. By growing your own seedlings instead of buying them from the nursery, you'll save money and have a wider choice of varieties. Nurseries don't always have seedlings available at the proper planting times, so by starting your own, you'll have seedlings when you need them. Some catalogs offer sampler size seed packets of treasured heirloom varieties or Mediterranean varieties that do well in our climate. That way you can try out several new varieties each year in addition to your dependable favorites. Store surplus seeds in a basket, in a closet, or in a cupboard. Surplus seeds seedlings can make very nice gifts. Order seeds this month because the time to start seeds indoors is coming soon. Next, I'm going to talk just a minute about crop rotation. And next month, we will have a much larger presentation on crop rotation, but I'm just going to say just a few words. It is a soil management practice for vegetable gardens that discourages soil-borne disease and pests. It also helps control weeds. Try to plant vegetables from the same family in different beds each year. Tools. You want to check your tools for dirt and rust, sharpen, clean, and oil as needed to protect them, replace any cracked handles. And while you're doing your planning for this year, do you need any new tools? And as always, a good pruner is essential. So next topic is soil management. During the wet months, do no harm to soil structure to avoid compaction, which means keep off your wet soil and refrain from working very wet soil. You also want to consider acquiring materials for making compost, mulching, and amending soil. Weeds. Control weeds while they are small by hand picking, hoeing, smothering with mulch or sheet mulching. And if you are not familiar with sheet mulching, the UC Integrated Pest Management system on the internet, you can look up sheet mulching and that will give you everything that you need for learning about sheet mulch. Pest control. Watch for and remove slugs and snails. Control your peach leaf curl by spraying with the copper-based fungicide if you have not done yet. And Heather mentioned that in her presentation. And then repeat again in February, just before bud break, if the rainfall is heavy. Sanitation. A clean garden discourages snails, slugs, earwigs, and disease. And if you take those little critters away, it deprives them of a happy home, and you want to keep your garden area raked, picked up, get any boards or junk or flower pots or any debris out of the way so you do not have any hiding places. Frost protection, and we have had some cool nights. You want to be sure to cover your tender citrus trees. You can use shade cloth or other cloth. You can use sheets. You can use plastic sheets, but it's good to attach them to stakes so that the cover does not touch the plant. So the top cover is actually more important than is a side cover. And then remove the covering once the sun is up to allow as much sun as possible to reach the plant. And well-watered plants are more resistant to frost damage than plants that are very dry. If severe frost is anticipated, add heat. Well, how do you do that? You want to use cords, fixtures, light bulbs, and we're not talking LED because we're trying to add heat. But be sure those fixtures are approved for outdoor use. So planting vegetables. Now we can start. You can plant the starts of artichokes and asparagus, onion seedlings and garlic sets, plant seeds of kale, parsley, radishes, and spinach directly in the ground. And we will also talk about harvesting. These pictures happen to be from my garden from last year, actually. And this is chicory, and some people might recognize this as radicchio. Radicchio is actually a red chicory. And when I talk chicory, most people are thinking about that weed that they often see in vacant lots that grows fairly tall and has bright blue flowers. But interestingly enough, the roots on those quote weeds are baked and ground and used as a coffee substitute or a food additive. Time also to harvest peas, and time also to harvest fennel. The bulbs can be cooked or eaten raw in salads or with dips. The fronds can also be eaten as well, and fennel is actually a member of the carrot family. This is a turnip from my garden, and turnips can be cooked or eaten raw in salads or with dips. And this is not a great picture, but turnip tops. The tops can be added to salads or cooked, and you'd cook them like you would kale or collard greens, or since they have a peppery zing, they work well in soups, quiches, or stews. And this is a picture of a daikon radish. It is common in Japanese and other Asian dishes and can brighten up meals, adding texture and a sweet flavor to dishes and condiments. It can be cubed, grated, or sliced. It adds bite and character. It can be eaten cooked or raw, and they are great pickled. And this is a picture of the daikon top. It was actually 17 inches long. The tops can be eaten raw in salads or cooked like any other green. And just FYI, they contain vitamin C and A, and they actually have more vitamin C, iron, and calcium than spinach. In addition to the things I have shown you so far, you also might be harvesting beets, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, and these plants you would have planted in the early fall or in the late summer. Harvesting brassicas. So we're talking broccoli and cauliflower here. You want to check those plants occasionally for maturity, because what you're actually eating is the flower bud. And if the flower bud turns to flower, the flavor turns quickly from pleasant to strong and unpleasant. And this I am so proud of. This is the very first cauliflower I have ever grown. And the seeds actually came from a seed packet a neighbor gave us, and it was in Italian. So I don't really know very much about it. Other than it certainly was a prolific grower. Most everything that I planted did in fact sprout. And this, interestingly enough, is from the same seed packet, but notice how much whiter it is with just a little bit of purple on it. And this is the first cabbage I have also ever grown, and it is certainly time to be harvesting those cabbages that went in late summer. This is Chinese cabbage that is just starting to head. Again, something that you would have planted in late summer, and its leaves can be eaten raw or cooked. And the information in this presentation came from the month-by-month guide to gardening in Napa County, which is available on the Master Gardener's website. And this is the resource page that Pat mentioned earlier and will be available on the Master Gardener site, so you don't have to take notes quickly. You may want to visit our site, and there's the address right there, napamg.ucanr.edu. And there is a page on that website that's called Healthy Garden Tips, which is extremely helpful and answers all sorts of basic questions. Also available, we have our help desk, and you can avail yourself of them by email, and we ask you to fill out a diagnosis sheet and enclose a photo if you can, or you can leave a phone message. Our office, because of the COVID, is a little bit iffy right now. We do have staff there, but we prefer that you try email or phone instead. And another thing that's also available on our website are the presentations that we have been doing for the Food Growing Forum and many other presentations that the Master Gardeners have done on things like pruning roses and succulents and various things from your garden. So at this point, I am finished, so there may be questions or not. So Pat, this is the end of my presentation.
All right, I'm looking at the chat. I don't see questions, but let me just say that if you have questions, oh, there, Sophia has a question. What other veggie garden seeds can we plant now? Boy, probably all kinds of greens, all kinds of Asian vegetables, lots of root vegetables. Lots of cool season vegetables can go in the ground starting in January, although they're going to be a little more quick to sprout if you wait a few weeks. And I'm going to try putting peas in the ground in the next week or two. I have some peas that I fall planted that haven't produced anything yet. So I will start with some peas. You could put favas in the ground right now if you hadn't done a bunch of favas as part of your cover crops. Any other ideas you guys can think of?
I was going to suggest it's a good time to plug your vegetable planting guide on the website.
Yeah, we do have on our Master Gardener, the local Master Gardener website, we have 3 different versions of planting calendars. Take your pick, which one helps you decide which one is easier for you to understand. And they're always, they're by month. They're very easy to figure out what you can plant this time of year. Linda mentioned you could plant onions. I would add you could plant leeks right now. It's a little bit late to plant garlic. If you want big heads of garlic, you want to plant those back in November. But if you have garlic you didn't get around to planting, I wouldn't hesitate to put it in the ground, because even if it doesn't fully head up, you'll have some lovely fresh garlic to use up later in the year.
What's coming up in my garden, I didn't plant it, but cilantro, it's just reseeds itself, and cilantro is sprouting right now. So that's something you could plant seed wise if you have it.
I've got lettuce and arugula sprouting from things that I let go to seed. Someone would like to know if we will be addressing microgreens in the future. That's a good idea for a topic, and we will consider it. It's not on our list at the moment, but that's something we ought to try. Next month, I think Heather or Linda mentioned we'll be talking more about crop rotation and just what the ins and outs of that are. And we'll be sharing some of our record keeping strategies. One of the things that I'm always mindful of this time of year is the records I kept last year are really helpful. And if I didn't keep records last year, I have no idea which tomato I really wanted to repeat, which tomato I'm never going to do again. Right now, the Master Gardeners are trialing. We trialed cauliflower in 2020, both spring and fall. And we're trialing broccoli last fall, and we're going to trial broccoli again this spring. And I'm enjoying this because I'm growing 4 different varieties of broccoli, and I know which one I like the best already. And it's useful to know that, because when you're reading a seed catalog and they're describing these fabulous vegetables, it's hard to understand if that's really what the kind of vegetable you want. I mean, I have grown more different kinds of melons than you want to know about, because they sounded so fabulous in a seed catalog, and felt in the end they were just pretty ordinary. But trial and error, I have come to know which ones I like the best. And that's how I feel about the broccoli, about the cauliflower, lettuces. I've grown a lot of those kinds of things, and I take notes about the ones that do the best and that are most productive and that I like the best. So I don't have to grow the average ones.
Hey, Pat, if you'd like me to share, I did open up the website page that has the calendars.
Well, you should be able to share, shouldn't you?
Yeah, would you like me to share that?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So I went to our website. This is our UC Master Gardener website. And if you go under garden questions, you get to gardening resources. And we have this whole list of healthy garden tips. But then we also have these really nice month-to-month guide, vegetable planting guide, and the vegetable planting calendar. So those are all there. And then under healthy garden tips, we also have the crop rotation one. So some nice
Yeah.
resources there on that website page. Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You all must be just doing really well at growing your edibles this month. I don't see any more questions.
I wanted to share that I also had a cauliflower that was from over a year ago that I had just chopped the head off and left it because I was keeping the roots in the ground because nothing else was there. And it produced 2 new cauliflower heads that were full size.
Really?
Year. Yeah, it just stayed in the ground for a whole year and then it produced another 2 heads actually.
Did it
Surprised me.
produce the first year or was it late and never producing?
It was from the field trials and I produced it. So I planted it a little late. I planted in November. It did produce a head in the early spring last year and I cut it off. And then I just left it, like I said, and it produced leaves all year and nothing else. And then this fall, it produced another 2 heads.
Hmm.
You know, when we were doing the cauliflower trials in the spring, I was late getting them out of the ground after they produced, and I had just one of like, I don't know, maybe a dozen plants that produced heads, florets, but it produced them in the summer and they looked gorgeous, but they were inedible because they produced in the summer, and when it's hot, those things don't, they're not very sweet at all. So you're lucky they waited to produce in the winter.
It was nice. Somebody's saying she just harvested side shoots from broccoli, Romanesco. Nice. I love the
Yeah.
Romanesco. It's so beautiful.
You know, in general, broccoli is much more likely to keep sprouting than cauliflower. That's why Yvonne is so tickled to have gotten more heads from the same plants, because they tend not to do as much side branching as the broccolis do.
It was the purple one. Is that Veronica? Was that the Veronica or no, graffiti?
No,
Graffiti.
Graffiti. Yeah, it was the graffiti one.
Yeah, and the one that repeated on me was that produced heads in the summer was a graffiti also.
Yeah, so maybe that might be a trial one of these days.
Yeah. Well, they have to be in the ground a really long time before they form that second side shoot. So not all of us want to leave them in the ground forever. And
Well, lazy
Katrina,
garden.
Pamela notices that she's got broccoli going to bloom and the honeybees are loving it right now. And you know, I might as well add, you can eat those blossoms. They're not going to be bitter. They're just going to be interesting. I sometimes will go out and harvest broccoli blossoms or whatever and toss them into a salad for the color and the little bit of extra flavor they give a salad.
I also use the cauliflower and broccoli leaves when I don't have enough kale. I just chop them up for my stir fry. They're quite good.
Well, we thank you for joining us for this hour. If I see no more questions, we can let you all disappear on us. But we look forward to seeing you again next month.